Year 8 of our marriage, and photos of Blake vacationing through Europe with his childhood sweetheart were suddenly all over the internet. The girl even captioned them shamelessly, "Forever in love, never an epilogue." I gave the post a thumbs up from my public account, then turned around and posted our marriage certificate on Twitter. He rang to demand an explanation. When he finally finished venting, I said in the calmest voice imaginable, "As you wish, let's get a divorce." He called just as I finished packing the last of my things from the Sterling Manor. It was almost comical, 8 years married to him, and besides the perfunctory gifts he'd hand me each year, my personal belongings barely filled 2 suitcases. Hardly surprising. After I'd defied my family for him, he'd kept me at home under the noble banner of virtuous wife and good mother. At first he'd still let me carry his supplementary black card. Later he began faulting me for everything, from my inability to read company trends to my failure to be as carefree and dazzling as Chloe, until even that card was taken back. I picked up to hear his icy voice, Chloe's soft sobs faint in the background. I glanced at the time. Europe was nearing midnight, hardly an hour that invited innocent explanations. "Vivian, what the hell are you playing at? Do you have any idea what kind of online harassment Chloe is getting because of you?" The last ember of hope inside me winked out. He wouldn't even remember that today was our wedding anniversary. Before, I would have rushed to whitewash the scandal in public. The last time Chloe pulled a stunt like this, I had excuses ready long before Blake faced friends and relatives. But now, I was done making excuses for either of them. "Apologize to Chloe right now, post online that it was all a misunderstanding, and maybe I'll forgive you," he ordered. Listening to that arrogant voice, I still felt a twinge in my chest. When I stayed silent, he softened a fraction, though his tone remained non-negotiable. "Vivian, Chloe is just in a bad place. We grew up together, you know I can't leave her alone." In the past, those words would have ignited a blowout fight, because Chloe already had a boyfriend. The man simply didn't belong to an old money name like Whittaker or Sterling, so Chloe never acknowledged him in front of Blake. But now his declaration left me oddly serene. "Right. Even with a boyfriend, Chloe still needs your company." Silence on the line, then his voice turned glacial. I cut him off. I'd had enough lectures and threats. "So, as you wish, we divorce." Several seconds of quiet followed before his detached question came. "You seriously want a divorce?" "I'm not throwing a tantrum. I want a divorce." He gave a short laugh, certain the wife who'd trailed after him for years was bluffing. "Playing hard to get. Doesn't work on me." "Fine, since you asked, we'll divorce. Just don't come crawling back in tears." The call died. I stared at the screen as it dimmed to black, lost in thought. Eleanor's call came immediately after. "Vivian, how could you? That girl Chloe adores Blake. She's just a child, pampered by the Whittakers, a little naive. She made a silly mistake. But if she's willful, should you, as the older sister, really slap her down like this? Delete that post, come back to the manor with him and a gift, apologize to Chloe, then put out a statement online. She'll forgive you, and it'll blow over." I almost laughed aloud at the audacity. When Blake and I had first announced our engagement, Eleanor treated me like a priceless jewel, changing my tea if it cooled by 3 degrees. Now she expected me to swallow every humiliation without protest. Do hearts change? Not really. Sterling, Blake, and I are about to divorce. I posted the truth. I have nothing to apologize for. And I'm not sure why Chloe calls me older sister. It's the 21st century, concubines are out of fashion. I hung up and tossed Eleanor into my blocked list. I glared at my phone. This still wasn't enough. The scandal mushroomed. Though Blake and Chloe threw Sterling and Whittaker weight behind suppressing the story, the uproar refused to die. Their European idyll ended early. After confirming their new flight through mutual friends, I rang Blake. Only after many rings did he pick up. "Figured out your mistake. Get back here and apologize to Chloe." I almost laughed at his self-assurance, ignoring it completely. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., the county clerk's office." A snort traveled down the line. "I'm taking Chloe home to the Whittakers tomorrow to clean up your mess." I don't have time. Though I'd already let Blake go, his certainty that I should yield to Chloe still made my chest tighten. "Suit yourself. I'll wait until 10. If you don't show, I'll file suit for divorce." I hope you're brave enough to follow through. Don't come weeping at my door later." He hung up almost at once. Listening to the dial tone, I felt a wave of dizziness. In the beginning, Blake and I had been inseparable, sweet as honey. But as time passed and more things happened, I began to see the rot deep inside him: indifference, womanizing, arrogance. Time had changed everything. Early the next morning I waited for him outside the county clerk's office. Half an hour. 1 hour. 2 hours. By the time the scorching noon sun hung directly overhead, I knew he wasn't coming. I wiped the sweat from my face, turned, and called family I hadn't spoken to in ages. The instant the call connected, something seemed to flash past me. "Dad." Before I could say more, his clear, steady voice came through. "If you're having regrets, come home. Your mom and I are always behind you. Come for dinner tonight. Alex will make your favorite sweet and sour ribs." My nose stung. I rubbed it and mumbled, "Dad, could you find me a good divorce lawyer?" He fussed a little, then immediately sent me a contact card. I added the attorney, explained my situation briefly, and he said it was complicated. We should meet in person. I set the appointment for 3 days later. I'd barely finished when an obnoxious voice sounded behind me. Well, sis-in-law. What are you doing here?" It was Jace, his best buddy. Back when Blake and I first got together, Jace had covered for him and Chloe plenty. After I exposed them, things turned frosty. Once, drunk, he'd even wished Blake and Chloe a long, happy life together. He hadn't defended me, only smiled and said, "He's wasted." We'd had a huge fight. He'd shouted, "Look at yourself. Nothing but a shrew. Why can't you be sweet and innocent like Chloe?" He claimed it was the booze talking. I believed it was the truth. "Need something?" We weren't exactly on sidewalk chatting terms. Arm slung around a curvy blonde, he grinned. "Why aren't you riding back to the manor with him today?" Without looking up I drawled, waiting for him to sign the papers. Jace froze, then stared like he hadn't heard right. "Come on, sis, Blake and Chloe are just friends. You're overreacting." I nodded. "May every person you love have lots of just friends like that." His smile collapsed. Ignoring him, I opened my car door. The AC washed away my irritation. My phone showed unread messages in an old group chat. Blake and Chloe arriving at the manor together. Chloe smiling serenely, Blake gazing at the crown of her head. Ours had been an old money alliance, yet we'd clicked. Eventually I truly fell for him. When Sterling's cash flow dried up, I'd filled the hole without blinking. He hugged me, swore he'd build the company into an empire and make me the envied Sterling. Eleanor and Richard were gentle then. When Adrian warned me Sterling might have bigger appetites, I'd laughed. Now, once my parents' protection slipped and they saw I loved him, my life flipped. He came home later and later, business dinners piled up, gossip columns buzzed, Eleanor and Richard turned cold, and after Chloe returned they barely looked at me. My phone pinged, "Blake. Chloe has a fever. Divorce can wait till tomorrow." Looking at that perfect couple photo, I felt only irony. Casey, maybe every scrap of my so-called happiness was wrapped in this mirage. Now that I saw Blake clearly, I couldn't be bothered to play along. I drove straight to the Sterling estate. Sterling had sensed the liquidity crack and pulled out in time. If I hadn't been blinded by love and poured every cent I had into his company, we might be even stronger today. I came home early, but everyone was already there, lined up on the sofa waiting. The moment Mom saw me, her eyes reddened. After I told them everything, Dad slammed the coffee table. "The Sterlings have gone too far." Adrian calmed him, then turned to me. "Vivian, I know you've got a plan. What do you want to do?" I lifted my head, gaze steady. "I want a divorce only. Before the divorce is final, I'm collecting interest from Sterling. For the 8 years I'd been married to him, I'd poured in real gold and silver, 8 years of youthful devotion, plus years of tolerance and grievances. Every last cent of it he would repay." With Sterling quietly fanning the flames, the scandal of Blake and Chloe that had just been smothered flared up again. I posted the voice memo of the call Eleanor and Blake made to me that day, along with the shot of the two of them walking into the Sterling estate hand in hand, and sent them straight to the internet. Homewrecker, infidelity, old money elite, every tag was clickbait gold. In under half a day the story was everywhere. and Sterling's shares kept sliding. Sterling's official account countered with childhood photos of Blake and Chloe, the subtext screeching that I was hysterical, that Blake and Chloe were pure as driven snow, just best friends who'd grown up together. The tide turned. Plenty of commenters decided the two were only friends. Sterling's dynasty-level royalty. Of course the Alpha CEO keeps a couple side pieces, what's the big deal? I acted as if I hadn't heard a word. I blacklisted every Sterling employee and every friend of his, and simply waited for counsel to finish drafting the papers so I could officially divorce Blake. Sterling's cash crisis back then would have buried the company without me. Now, when I divorced Blake, every dime of interest coming to me could be donated to a foster home before I'd let him keep a penny. No matter how many times Sterling's lawyers insisted that my demand for a seventh of the estate was outrageous, I didn't care. That afternoon a mutual friend group chat showed me a candid of Blake and Chloe strolling along the beach. Neither looked touched by the storm, if anything, they were flashing matching bands. I had to admire their stress tolerance. The last of my hesitation burned away in an instant. Barely 2 minutes after the image appeared, Lydia, once my closest friend, reposted it online. Here's to everyone who thinks this is just friends, may your future spouses collect a few buddies just like these. The Redmonds were blue-blooded themselves. Lydia had loathed Chloe since nursery school, and most of their fortune sat offshore. Sterling could huff and puff, but it couldn't touch her, so Lydia waded in with claws out, shredding the shameless couple. Besides, Sterling's own house was on fire right then. The litigator Richard recommended moved fast, filing suit against Blake before the outrage cycle peaked. He stared at me in shock, unable to believe the woman who had always forgiven him could actually be ruthless. That same day, edgy and irritable, Blake changed his mind when the car was about to reach the Sterling estate. "Take me to the villa." The villa had once been our newlywed nest, but he had hardly come back since. The driver swung the car around, and minutes later it rolled to a stop at the front steps. Inside, the house was spotless. The sight tightened his chest. He walked through the rooms and finally realized every trace of me had vanished. The gifts he'd given lay scattered in the dressing room like trinkets their owner had never valued. He felt a suffocating weight. He still refused to believe the divorce was real. Back when the tabloid rumors first started, I'd raged, threatened divorce, even stormed out. He assumed my love was bottomless. Once he confirmed I wasn't suicidal, he'd gone back to clubbing with lingerie models, flirting with assistants. Within a week I'd crawl home soft-spoken. He couldn't fathom why this time I wouldn't fold. Because of our anniversary? Impossible, since year 3, they'd stopped acknowledging it. He circled back to the old excuse. I was just jealous again. With public opinion tilting, Chloe panicked. A pampered princess, she cared about only 2 things, men and reputation. She hadn't fully hooked perfect on paper Blake, yet now wore the scarlet H for homewrecker, and the Whittaker name was splashed with mud. Hearing the clique's snide asides, she was desperate to flip the narrative. She remembered her almost invisible boyfriend, though she didn't know I'd flipped him first. No man tolerates endless unless he doesn't care or wants something bigger. Chloe's guy was the latter, third-tier old money, last in the birth order, no shot at the family firm. Tired of begging his eldest brother for cash, he hunted deep-pocketed heiresses. But Chloe's flagrant PDA with him bruised the pride of a boy raised on entitlement. While she got side-eye yet still had Whittaker and shaky Sterling clout, he had nothing. Her antics humiliated him. The moment I dangled a lifeline, he bit. Whittaker called a press conference and mid-event unveiled Chloe's engagement. "Ladies and gentlemen, the gossip about my daughter and the Sterling boy is pure fantasy." The much-posted Europe trip. They weren't alone, Joshua was with them the entire time. Rowan shot Derek and Chloe a meaningful look. Chloe's arm was looped through Derek's, her smile demure, her tone absolute. "That's right, if anyone else spreads rumors, my fiancé and I will sue them into oblivion." Derek took the mic, stared down the wall of lenses, and sneered. "Ladies and gentlemen, I, Derek Zhao, refuse to marry a woman this trashy and deceitful." The room froze, then erupted in whispers. Chloe's face drained white, she gaped at him in disbelief. "Every word on the internet is true." Derek was ready. A flick of his wrist and the giant screen behind him began cycling proof. "Before Blake flew to Europe with my poor fiancé, She told me she'd fought with her family and needed to get away alone, specifically asking me not to come. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Derek kept talking, each document neatly time-stamped and explained. Chloe had never faced a firing squad like this. She stood rooted while Rowan signaled security, only to realize none of his men could get near the stage. Derek alone couldn't have choreographed this. The only person vicious enough to torch Chloe's reputation was that Sterling girl. On the other side of town, the spectacle didn't disturb Blake and me at all. Chloe had briefed him on her plan. He was already puffed up, certain that once her stunt delivered fresh evidence, even if we divorced, I'd walk away with crumbs. When the moment felt right, his counsel rose unhurriedly. We have new evidence. With the judge's nod, he played the Whitaker press conference footage. The second the clip ended, his complexion crashed. He lunged to stop it but was pulled back into his seat. He could only glare holes through me. When the presentation finished, I handed up the files proving I'd personally patched Sterling's liquidity crater during the crisis. Minutes later the ruling came down exactly as I'd calculated. Outside the courthouse Blake blocked my path, eyes black with rage. "Vivian, you planned this." I was long past caring. I gave a small nod, expression neutral. "Think whatever you want, Vivian." His voice cracked. "We were husband and wife. You volunteered that money. Now you're taking 70% of Sterling? Did your breeding get devoured by dogs?" Before I could answer, Adrian yanked me behind him, smiled thinly, and said, "Sterling's breeding ran off to Europe with Cameron." Camera flashes fired like bullets, choking his reply. Sterling's name was already mud, and he couldn't risk more headlines. Fate piled on. Before I even reached the estate, the internet detonated with ridicule aimed at him and Chloe, especially Blake. His courthouse rant had been captured. People who'd called me vindictive suddenly realized Sterling would have collapsed without me. The mockery intensified. From adulterous to fraudulent trophy husband, every label tangled into a net that pulled tighter each hour. He seemed unhinged. He circled the Sterling gates incessantly and cycled through burner numbers to barrage me with calls and texts. After the 20th call, I told Alex to chase him off and hammer a new sign into the lawn. Blake and dogs not admitted. Cabin fever set in, so Lydia and I went shopping. Thanks to Sterling and a rival house feeding the flames, Blake and Chloe memes still had half a shelf life. When we returned, he was plastered to the gate like gum on a Louboutin heel. A thunderclap cracked, rain sheeted down. I glanced up and told Alex, "Bring the poor thing inside, it's pouring." His eyes lit up. Vivian was bluffing. She still loved him. He took one hopeful step, then watched Alex haul a soaked yellow and white puppy from the shrubs. When no one inside acknowledged him, his face went volcanic. Within minutes the rain had turned him into a drowned rat. Just as he turned to leave, an umbrella appeared over his head. He spun, ready to exploit the concern he was sure he'd see in my eyes, and found Chloe in a white sundress instead. "Chloe, what are you doing here?" His voice was stiff. He was accustomed to towering over her, and she'd always played along. He had never looked this pathetic. He shot one last glare at me through the window as I tickled the puppy. Chloe's smile was soft, but her eyes were fracturing. "I heard Adrian was at Sterling," she murmured, "and with this storm, she faltered, then lowered her head. "It's raining so hard, Adrian. You didn't even bring an umbrella. If you get sick, what then?" His heart had momentarily softened, but the next second he caught himself and quickly pulled Chloe back. "Who exactly are they?" The sorrow frozen on Chloe's face cracked. She'd assumed he would melt at her obedience and gentleness, never expecting. "Still," she answered, Jace and Lydia. They're going crazy in the group chat." He clenched his teeth. Lydia again. Lydia had flown home with me, witnessed his belated stick-to-you act, and immediately spilled every detail to her girlfriends. Jace, meanwhile, had at me in the same chat with the ridiculous line, "A reformed playboy is worth his weight in gold, sis. Forgive Blake, won't you?" I snorted at his nonsense, snatched my phone off the sofa, and from the second-floor window snapped several shots of Blake and Chloe performing devoted couple at the Sterling gates. With a few taps I dropped the photos straight into the group. The chat fell dead silent. Even Jace, who'd been singing his praises, flushed, resentment bubbling. He was here salvaging his reputation while Blake drooled over Chloe at the front door. They might be shameless, but he still had a face to keep. After that fiasco, Blake stayed out of my sight for days. Sterling's business hit the rocks. When I walked, I didn't take Sterling shares, I took the cash equivalent. He and I had a prenup, yet in 8 short years he'd rocketed the Sterlings higher, so my payout dwarfed my original stake. The moment the money hit my account, the company staged an encore of its favorite drama, a sudden cash crunch. Richard and Blake scrambled like ants on a hot plate, but Eleanor's eyes had already shifted to Chloe. Back then I was blinded by love, aching for forever, so I'd patched Sterling's hole in one lump sum. Eleanor had tasted that sugar and now openly hinted Chloe should do the same. Chloe clung to him partly for his looks, but chiefly because he was Sterling's heir, the Sterling who could sway Riverdale with a flick of his pen. Even if she wanted to play Stand By Your Man, her own purse was a drop in Sterling's bucket, and neither she nor the Whittakers planned to empty themselves for us. She wasn't his wife yet, and with my cautionary example of bankrolling Sterling right in front of her, both Chloe and the Whittakers refused to follow my footsteps. None of that concerned me anymore. After a few days' rest, I marched back into Sterling headquarters and reclaimed my old office. I just didn't expect Chloe to corner me in the parking garage after work. Problem? I asked, frowning at the dark circles under her eyes. Her face looked haggard, her gaze clouded. Vivian, she rasped. Why? Something felt off. I speed-dialed Adrian. Why? Why did you divorce him? Why did you take Sterling's money? Who says you could? Chloe's eyes flared, voice shrill. Because without me there'd be no Sterling today. I poured years into Blake. Did you think I was some temple goddess handing out charity? I stared her down, my contempt stabbing straight through her. I'm a businesswoman, Cameron. Weigh the gains, cut the losses, walk when the numbers sour, that's what we do. Her fists clenched at her sides, knuckles white. Without you I'd be Sterling. Half of everything would be mine. I almost laughed, arms folded, watching her performance. Suddenly she lunged like a maniac. I sidestepped, slammed her to the pavement. Vivian. Meeting my mocking smile, Chloe remembered long before marriage I'd studied Krav Maga for 10 years. Minutes later the cops arrived with Adrian in tow. Police at Sterling HQ, me escorted to a squad car, word shot back to the family, and Blake, too rattled to verify, leaked the story online. Barely a month had passed since the last scandal, netizens still had fresh memories, and when the official statement finally landed the comments exploded, but the truth was out. He finally saw it. Chloe never loved him, she only wanted to graft herself onto Sterling. Balancing the pros and cons, he dusted off his repentant husband role and came crawling back only to find rival old money clans circling like vultures, carving Sterling apart while he fought fires on every front. By the time Sterling filed for bankruptcy I already knew the market by heart. I strode back in and took control of the company. Thanks for listening. Rate today's story 1 to 10, and if you liked it smash like and share. We can't wait to read your comments, subscribe for more, see you next time.